You're watching Biochem Health with Kevin and Thuy. Hey everybody, welcome to my new podcast. If you're watching this on Poker Road or Poker Static, then you can expect in the future for me to bring in other guests, other poker friends, and we're just going to be talking about all sorts of fun stuff. And hopefully one of my first guests will be Barry Steingreen, as my mom likes to call him. So he's finding out right now that I'm going to nag him to be on the show. Now, this episode introduces the Biochem Health series, where I'll be interviewing my co-host, Kevin, about a range of health topics. As you know, if I'm not at the poker tables fighting evil, hairy poker opponents, I'm fighting for my life. I've been dealing with cancer over the past year and a half. It's resulted in 2 major surgeries. I've tried some conventional methods. I've tried some alternative methods. And the last things that doctors told me was that I was still going to wind up having to deal with another tumor growth, even if I did radiation and more chemo. So I got referred to my co-host, Kevin, by an actor-director who was dealing with liver cancer. The doctors told him he only had 5 months to live, and that was 5 years ago. I've been on his protocol for the past 2 weeks, so as time goes by, I'll be updating you on the progress and letting you know how it goes. Now, Kevin, you have quite a repertoire of credentials. You have a master's in science, you're a naturopathic healer, you have your own lab when you're doing research in biochemistry, and you've been running your own health clinic for a while. How did you get into studying medicine to begin with?
At 17 years old, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And basically, at that particular age, obviously, I had little or no knowledge of medicine per se. And from that standpoint, I was always encouraged to look for options on how to take care of that particular pathology, of which I do not have anymore, or I'm not diagnosed with diabetes, and I would consider that I do not have diabetes. And that is essentially what inspired me to look forward to the horizon of other options in healthcare, and realizing that dealing with healthcare and pathologies wasn't as difficult if we understood the premise. And that is essentially what started me on the path to biochemistry, which is really my true love in my profession. And that's how I started.
So throughout this series, I'm going to be picking Kevin's brain about all sorts of things. And I don't anticipate everyone to agree with his views, especially to begin with, because a lot of them are contradictory to what you hear in the newspapers or what you hear from your school and stuff like that. But I think that the majority of viewers, even if there are some who disagree, I think the majority of people will find this really interesting because it presents such a unique way to approach medicine. And it's going to be up to each person to ask themselves, how knowledgeable is this guy, and can I believe what he says? And that's something that's going to take a while for you to figure out if you approach it with a healthy level of skepticism, but also open-mindedness. So send us your feedback as time goes by. We're definitely interested in hearing what you think. Now, Kevin, how does having a background in research biochemistry give you a good perspective on treating illness?
I personally feel that if we understand biochemistry, we can understand the primary root of all pathologies. And to implement or season your statement about allopathic medicine or Western medicine, I am definitely not opposed to allopathic medicine. I just think there needs to be a logical and rational way of approaching it. As an example, antibiotics I favor in many cases. It's how the tool is used and why the tool is used inappropriately and at the wrong times. That needs to be addressed. So biochemistry gives us the idea or the premise on when to use an antibiotic and when to use it appropriately. As an example, with chemotherapy or radiation for cancer or anything like that can be very effective if it's understood how to use it in the right parameters. I feel that in many cases those parameters have been lost or broken, and it's not the fault of the practitioner as much as it is the training that they've had. So it's really important to me to communicate to people that we can marry the two, allopathic medicine, biochemistry, or naturopathy, and bring them together to create a synergy of something that can be a very formidable pattern for making sure that we deliver healthcare in the right fashion. So that just emphasizes my feelings on healthcare.
To give more of a background on your credentials, you've created a lot of different things based on your own research and your own formulations. And a few of those things are patents that are currently pending. Can you talk about that?
A few of they're non-provisionals that are patent pending statuses. And what I do basically, Thuy, is I design things that I feel are missing or gapped in today's healthcare procedures, meaning one of the sciences I have designed is generating something called adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP. And these things, consequently, we have to look at the whole environment and why we're seeing pathologies increase rather than decrease in most cases in modern day medicine. In most cases, that is, new pathologies arise. And I look at the very reason, I like to look at the premise on why these things have origins. ATP diminishment can be one of those origins on why many pathologies occur. So one of these provisional patents that I designed increases adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy molecule produced in the mitochondria that all living organisms require. That gives you an example of one of the provisionals. A patent that I received on generating new skin or generating the propagation of new collagen is demonstrative because it can help so many people out who have suffered from trauma. It's not just in the cosmetic field where it causes lines and wrinkles to disappear, but literally it can be very helpful for people with pathologies such as eczema, psoriasis, so on and so forth. So once again, it's being able to meet the gaps that are not yet present in today's medical or health establishment. And that's to give you a general idea of some of the patents and the provisionals that I've worked on.
And getting these patents is not, it's not cheap. It's very expensive, correct?
And it's difficult. As a matter of fact, it's easier to get the money than it is the science. Getting a patent is difficult, particularly in the healthcare profession or medicine, because there's so many other arts that are arranged. As an example, if we look, let me go back to the collagen propagation. How many sciences are designed, if you could grow new skin, cartilage, elastin, keratin, anything like that, it's demonstrable. I mean, so there's a lot of art out there that you have to overcome and prove that the science is not yet correct enough to be able to do adequate amounts of propagation, in this case of collagen. And the patent being awarded was a huge victory for not only me, but my patent firm, which is located in Portland, Oregon. It was one of the biggest patents to be granted probably in America in the last year because of that reason. My benefit is I can deliver it, make it available to people that no longer have to suffer. And it's not just about the cosmetic world. You know, women are using it for wrinkles and lines and everything else, which is a secondary note to what the process does. most importantly, people that can take it that have, as I mentioned before, skin conditions such as eczema and psoriasis. And that gives you an idea that the patent itself is very difficult, in particular in medicine, to be granted. So I feel very fortunate and honored that occurred about 5 months ago.
You've done a lot of research in biochemistry, but you've told me that you no longer wear a white lab coat.
That is correct. And the reason why is because I feel that there is an attached format on seeing a doctor, that the doctor is the boss. And it's very important to understand that when people see a doctor, you are their boss. They're there to facilitate and be able to help you. And I feel in many cases, many, not all, but in many cases, the physicians no longer listen to the physician or to the patient. And it's important for the physician to be able to listen to the patient, because the patient knows more than we do about what's going on with their body. Then we can assess and determine the best route that we think would be beneficial for them getting better. So the white coat thing is breaking the format when kids come in to see me, that they don't have to see a doctor who's wearing a white coat, because it can be a little disturbing for some people to go to a doctor's office for a doctor's appointment. So that's why I do not wear a white coat anymore. That's why I have black dogs.
You really make it a point to listen to your patients. And one of the articles you sent me, which I'm going to post on the Biochem blog, is this article called To Be Heard, where you're talking about how nowadays you feel like maybe doctors aren't spending enough time listening to their patients' problems.
That is correct. That includes every kind of practitioner, from a naturopath, an acupuncturist, an allopath. We need to really sit down and listen to what the patient has to say, because the patient is there to be heard. And once again, we're there. We wouldn't be here if you weren't asking us to be here. I wouldn't be in this position if I wasn't asked to do what I do. I wouldn't be designing the formulas I design if I wasn't asked by the general public for the need to have something like that out there. So to me, it's very important to listen to the patient, to honor what they have to say, and then obviously assess the best way of dealing with this in the best way that I can possibly, arrange as far as the protocol goes. Mm-hmm.
Part of your homeopathic background, you learned from studying in Asia and running your own clinic in Nepal. What was that experience like?
Well, basically, it wasn't as much as learning in Nepal, but I wanted to be in Asia. After I was initiated in doing my residency, I lived in Kathmandu, Nepal, and it was more about instilling to the people, the Nepalese, and we call them expats, which are foreigners that live in foreign countries, like Nepal in this case, is to be able to give them the opportunity of other types of medical protocols, rather than just the stereotypic allopathic procedures that are used in that area. And that was quite adventurous for me. I learned quite a bit about parasitology and about pathologies that we don't see here in America. So it was very gratifying for me, because I can bring that art to this country and to my patients.
You had your own clinic in Nepal, and you had one in Oregon, and now you're running one in Wyoming.
Correct.
A lot of your formulas you use to work with professional athletes.
Mm-hmm. Correct. The ATP is one formula. Well, not just the ATP. The formula that generates collagen, obviously, cartilage, as many of you probably see the value in that. But the ATP is extremely important due to the fact that athletes, as we know, induce a lot of metabolic acidosis, respiratory acidosis, lactic acid buildup in the muscle. Well, lactic acid, as many of us know, causes irritation within the muscle, and soreness and recovery is much slower. ATP essentially facilitates that by managing the lactic acid, metabolizing it, utilizing it for the Krebs cycle to produce more ATP. So yes, a lot of professional athletes in the NFL, and other sports leagues are using ATP and finding the benefits of what it's like actually to be able to recover in a fashion that they haven't experienced before. So it's very gratifying for me to be able to present that to the public.
Are you a big sports fan?
I am in college football. That's it.
What's
College
your-
football, and I teach martial arts. I instruct martial arts, even though I don't watch martial arts much or UFC fighting or anything like that. But probably college football is my biggest, and as well as boxing. So I do enjoy sports to that degree.
What about the UFC?
The UFC, there are people that that ask for my services with the UFC. So I'm familiar with a lot of the fighters personally.
Oh.
I don't watch a lot of UFC, probably because I just don't have the time. I don't have the time much to watch college football as well.
Yeah, I don't even know when that stuff is on anyways.
But my gratification comes from the fact that I can get a lot of these professional athletes to recover very quickly with treatment protocols that I do, or the protocols like the ATP, the supplementation that seems to be very effective for what they require, particularly after their events or before their events. And once again, that really, to me, is what this whole game's about, is being able to provide something they haven't had an opportunity to experience before.
I want to talk more about this clinic that you're running in Wyoming. What type of illnesses or physical conditions do people come to you with?
Probably a better answer to that question would be what illnesses don't they come with? That's a smaller list. I would suggest I see probably about almost every pathology, excluding tropical diseases that we don't see here in America. I would suggest that I probably see almost every pathology that could be imaginable.
Even HIV?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And people come with you for arthritis, for you've had a lot of cancer patients too.
Correct.
What is your success rate on all the different pathologies that you treat?
I would suggest that success rate, from what I hear back, now remember, this is dictated on the patients calling us, keeping us informed on how they're doing. Out of the patients that keep us informed on how things are going, I would suggest it's probably in the high 80% range. And obviously we don't know, a lot of the patients or many of the patients don't keep in touch with us, so we really lose contact with that. But when we talk about physical ailments such as back sprains, lower back pain, necks, wrists, so on and so forth, that's relatively easy to take care of. We probably are 87% to 90% in a situation like that when it comes to structural conditions. As far as internal pathologies, when you're talking about rheumatoid arthritis or autoimmune diseases or so on and so forth, we have a pretty good track record as well. And once again, I would like to attribute that to my work, but it's important to remember that I'm standing on the shoulders of the people that have taught me. So it's really their work that should be accountable for the type of success I have here at the clinic.
And who are these people that you've learned from?
Just fellow colleaves of mine, teachers, professors who I attended school with, and I do have to admit that I do calculate and I do formulate a lot of my own procedures. But obviously, without them to instigate the basic ingredients, I wouldn't have been able to come up with those formulations. So in this clinic, I do offer a lot of things that unfortunately, you cannot get anywhere else in the country due to the fact that I'm the one who has basically formulated them. And I say unfortunately because at some point in time I'd like to be able to teach other practitioners how to be able to help other people. That doesn't mean that my particular type of protocol can help everyone. I wish I could be able to help everyone. But it means that our high event of being able to have the success rate here shows me that this can be shared with a lot of the community, and that's what I'm excited about. And yet it's a little discouraging that I would like other people in other parts, other states, and so on and so forth, to be able to share that with their patients, so they would have the opportunity to share the benefits in this process as well.
Something that's unique about you is that you've created a lot of your own formulas, but you are not trying to hoard the information to yourself and kind of keep this monopoly on your formulas. You want to share it. You want practitioners to contact you, and you want to teach them about your methods.
Correct. I feel that is very important. One thing that I've learned and it's a quite effective analogy, is that in China, traditionally, the doctor was paid when there was no one in his clinic. That just displayed that he was doing his job. The doctor wasn't paid when his clinic was full, because it was showing that he wasn't doing his job. The same premise, I believe, holds true, that money should not be the driving force. We're here really to help people. If it's not just people, it's animals or however you want to extend this. And it's not the money. It's about being able to tell people the truth. And that's why chemistry comes in, biochemistry as well, is to be able to share the truth with pathologies. And you bring up a very good point, that I think in many cases, modern medicine has lost its avenue, so to speak, due to the fact that money has instigated so much decisional processes in how it's performed and so on and so forth. And that to me is unfortunately disfavorable, because you can see it in today's country with healthcare plans and so on and so forth, where so many people are worried about how to get taken care of with their problems, and that's discouraging. So money to me, go ahead.
And we'll touch on that a little bit later, but I just want to kind of finish bringing out your all the projects that you're working on right now.
Sure. The other projects, other than that, is a cookbook. They will have all of the pathologies, or a lot of the main pathologies, and how recipes can be utilized to actually help those pathologies. How do you, in the book, I want to instill that once again, in allopathic medicine, there are very effective procedures, aspirin as an example, antibiotics, but to give you a guideline on not to override those medications. And once again, it's important for me to restate that I'm not against allopathic medicine. What I have a problem with is how it's used and how its limits. People, in many cases, don't understand the limits on how allopathic medicine should be used. Just like naturopathic medicine, it has its limits as well. And we have to understand what those limitations are.
So when this cookbook comes out, when you got a publisher and you're done writing it, can people pretty much just turn to whatever page that describes their illness and read how to eat their way to good health?
Not just eat, but also what is planned is there will be a protocol on specific supplements that can be very advantageous to take for that specific type of pathology. As an example, someone came in today with their husband has rosacea. Rosacea is a situation that is an inflammatory condition on the skin, mostly in the face, the malar regions of the face, and basically causes something we call telangiectasia, which is dilated capillaries. And that can be helped just as simply as administering B2, which is an inexpensive B vitamin. And that's the important aspect. And I bring that up as an example because we don't have to use hydrocortisone creams, or we don't have to use antibiotic creams. We can use something as simple as inexpensive as B2 to take care of something that and people just, have no idea. They're told by the doctor to take this antibiotic, and it's literally that easy. So the book will have things like that that's as simple and easy to get at your fingertips. It's just going down to the store.
I'm really looking forward to having that come out, and I'll definitely be one of the purchases. You're a big Led Zeppelin fan.
That is correct. That is correct. Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, and the Yardbirds, and everything else. That is correct.
And I told you that, I have some friends that work in the music business, and you made an interesting request.
To have Jimmy Page, I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that Jimmy Page suffers from a bit of arthritis in his fingers. And there's a protocol that I've designed that's excellent for taking care of arthritis, and a lot of people, I'd say this is a great success response we have for taking care of arthritis, and it'd be great to have Jimmy Page come out here so I could take care of his hands. But obviously he's more than busy probably to come out to Wyoming, but I'd be able to offer that for him. I'd be happy to do that.
Right. And I'm sure you'd be willing to fly to him too.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be a problem at all.
All right. So anybody that's watching this and has some way to contact Jimmy Page, let us know. I actually sent a tweet to someone who I thought was his manager, and he never responded to me. So he either thinks he's either not his manager, or he doesn't care about Jimmy, or he thinks that I'm crazy.
Well, Jimmy Page is really, really hard to get to. He's really hard because he's very popular. He's one of the most popular musicians known, and you know, I just enjoy his music. I have ever since I was a kid, so that's fun. So I hope you're feeling okay. Have you been feeling good?
I'm feeling good. I'm still waking up very tired, but I'm taking the supplements that you've given me, and now after I take them, I'm full of energy, and and I feel good. I definitely feel good.
Excellent.
All right. So let's move on to the topic of today's episode. Now that we've gotten Kevin introduced and people know a little bit more about him, the title of this episode is "Healthcare is Too Damn High." And we're asking, why is it so high? And what can we do to bring it down? Because it's outrageous. We have probably one of, if not the most expensive healthcare system in the world. We'd pay so much more money for surgery and the same drugs as other countries. And it just doesn't seem fair, because if it's so expensive, then you expect that our system to be the best in the world. We should be at number one, but according to the year 2000 World Health Organization reports on world health systems, we're ranked 37th. And it just doesn't make any sense. So in order to understand why our system is so messed up and so crazy, and I think people listening will be interested in learning more about this, because not only does our expensive healthcare system affect our deficit, but it affects a lot of poker players who are watching, and entrepreneurs who have to buy their own insurance and have to pay ridiculous premiums. So to really understand the foundation for why it's so outrageous, we have to go back to, I think it was the early 1900s, where there was tremendous competition between homeopathic medicine and allopathic medicine for the business from people. Now, what you practice, Kevin, would be considered homeopathic. What does that exactly mean?
Well, not necessarily homeopathic. That's one of the things I practice. Homeopathic literally means that it's the same disease, like treats like. And I don't necessarily practice that as much as, as an example, a lot of other practitioners, and it's very formidable in some cases. But I think it's important to get back to what you're talking about when you said it doesn't make any sense. Pardon the pun, but it does make sense, and that's why it's the most expensive healthcare arrangement here in America, is because the cents means, obviously, is in dollar forms.
Right.
Cents meaning the money.
It's very profitable.
So what's important, in other words, it's very profitable, and that's hard to remove from the system, is because all of these pharmaceuticals and so on and so forth see the profitability, because you have to remember, they look at it from a business standpoint. If they're in the red, they're in the red, and they have to make sure that their stock investors are happy and so on and so forth. But what concerns me is, and many of you out there who are watching this, if you are, is that the commercials that come up, they come up repetitively. If you've taken Accutane, you have the right to sue the companies. If you've taken statin drug, you're going to see this continue to come up, because now the lawyers are getting involved in this, saying we can make money off the dangers that the drugs are doing. So in the meantime, the patient gets bounced around because they're stacking the drugs, they're taking many more than was originally intended. And then what happens is they suffer from the end results, which are not always favorable. So when we talk about the premise, remember, this country, in my opinion, lives on fear. fear, this country has almost become addicted to fear, meaning that we want to hear, that cancer is going to kill us. And when we want, well, it's not that we want to hear it, but essentially what we do is we say, we got to do whatever we can. They essentially have you held over a barrel, saying you will pay what we offer you. And that, I think, is where education comes into play, meaning, okay, let's look at this, let's evaluate this. You don't have to use this chemotherapy if you don't need to in this particular condition. You do have to use this chemotherapy in this particular condition. Evaluate the correct synopsis. And then what you can do is you can say, well, I can use this as an adjunct to what I do on this side. That would demonstratively bring down the cost of healthcare if people understood that there are other ways in order to deal. As an example, I gave you an analogy of rosacea. B2 is about $6 a bottle. And a hydrocortisone cream is $35 a tube. You can see the difference here. If we integrate the two and say, listen, we don't have to use that, we can use this, it all comes down to education again and realizing I really want to encourage people to do their own self-realization and studies about pathologies and so on and so forth. So to answer your question in depth, sorry about that, about healthcare and why it's so expensive, is because we live in a society, unfortunately, that is driven by fear in many cases. If people understood the truth about pathologies, the truth about them, they wouldn't get as alarmed as what they're told or what they see on the internet. That's why the chemistry becomes important.
So from a profit standpoint, if I was some huge corporation who just wanted to make tons of money, the way to maximize my profits would be to, number one, instill fear in people. Number two, not educate them on all their different options and make them think that in order to get better, they only have a narrow set of options that only I could provide, correct?
That I would agree with that. That is exactly it. And what we want to do is we want to invite the medical community, the allopathic community to join us, to say, listen, there are other ways of taking care of this that you can also be profitable. It might not be the range that you're looking for, but listen, there are ways that you can provide health care in the same establishment like UCLA or Stanford, which they're doing now. They understand that, as an example, acupuncture can be effective, or biofeedback and using supplements. And that's what's gratifying, is these big universities are understanding that we can offer options to the patient that are less costly, and they can save the country a great deal of money when it comes to healthcare.
So you wouldn't exactly call your methods homeopathic. I'm not entirely sure what it means, but I guess you would call it naturopathic.
I would call it chemistry.
You'd call it chemistry, okay.
Biochemistry, that's exactly the format on how I work. And when I explain that to people, naturopathy, unfortunately, just as allopathic medicine, can have gaps. It's important, once again, to understand the premise. To me, personally, chemistry offers all of our recognition thus far that we understand science. There's more to learn, obviously, but how enzymes work on full potential, we call it maximum velocity or pH ratios, and how everything works. Basically, when we understand the biochemistry, the format, regardless if we're a homeopath, a naturopath, an allopath, we understand the premise. It's science. And I have been accused of being too scientific, but let the acquisitions let them come, let them accuse me. But I'm glad I'm glad I look at it from a molecular point of view, because I can get at the premise much quicker than a lot of people out there in the medical profession today. And I'm grateful that I'm able to do that.
It's funny that people will just find a way to criticize everything. If they'll say that this doesn't have enough science to it, but then they meet a guy like you who's just all about science, and then they say it's too much science.
It is. When I'm asked by physicians to send, there's no possible way the trimethylated glycine can do what it does, I want to see the science, and I will send them the schematics, the biochemical pathways, and they go, well, I don't understand this, and it's like, it's sad, you should. There's one format that I want to bring up here that's important, is continual saturation of information and education is important to me. If one walks into a doctor or a veterinarian or so on and so forth, and they have the plaques hanging on the wall, that only indicates that they ran the obstacle course 20 years ago. It doesn't mean they can still run the obstacle course. But based on the plaques hanging on the wall, people assume that they can still run that obstacle course. that is, in my opinion, a very quick assessment that has to be reevaluated. And that's what I encourage people to ask me questions. I encourage people to look back up on information I give, if it's anything, and to establish what I'm telling them. That's very important to me.
And so I guess the whole point of studying chemistry is that once you have a solid foundation of science, then you understand, why diseases arise, and then because you understand why they arise, you have a better way of treating them.
That is correct, and it's absolutely wonderful. It's remarkable, and it's difficult to understand biochemistry. It does take some time, but once you understand it, it becomes a whole new world. The avenue of being able to calculate and to figure out, as an example, how cancer exists, what happens when a cell goes through mutation, as an example, why the DNA doesn't anneal, which is repairing itself, why rheumatoid arthritis occurs, why the antibodies respond. Everything from a chemical standpoint begins to make sense. And then you can take that and attach it to a protocol biochemically that will address the biochemical scenario that's going on in the body. That's the beauty of the whole thing, is it's biochemistry meeting biochemistry. It's being able to translate, as an example, if someone is offered medication, like as an example, antibiotics, we can biochemically translate that into a healthier protocol that will initiate the same process that will eradicate the bacteria without the negative aspects. That's the beauty of biochemistry. Mm-hmm. It's translating everything. We can look at an antibiotic, understand it biochemically how it works, and then we can take that and translate it into another compound that will not essentially impart a problem, as an example, on the probiotic response in the intestinal tract, or how bacteria adapts and begins to develop new strains and so on and so forth. That's the beauty of biochemistry. Personally, I think this is the future of medicine. That's how I look at it.
And we've talked a lot about allopathic medicine, but I don't think that people know what that is. Can you explain that?
Allopathic medicine is generally what we refer to as any doctor, so to speak. And generally, if we talk about an oncologist, a gynecologist, any doctor that we recognize in the hospital facility or the medical facility, allopathic basically is to remove A, meaning no, pathic, disease, no disease. That's basically where that term comes from. And that's basically allopathic medicine, or typically was referred to as the Western industrialized medical procedures or process.
So what I understand allopathic medicine would be kind of heavily surgery-based and more emphasis on treating the symptom instead of the illness. Would that be correct?
That is correct, even though many surgical procedures are very valuable. As an example, broken bones, pinning bones, so on and so forth. And at times, surgeries are important. It's just recognizing, once again, what the limitations are, because there are a lot of surgical procedures that are done that are not necessary. Mm-hmm. Gallbladder procedures, as an example, are done too excessively because the gallbladder can be treated in other ways in most cases.
And to give people an example of this idea of allopathic medicine and the difference between treating symptoms and actually treating the illness itself, we had a viewer from our pilot episode send me an email asking, if you had severe heartburn, and if your doctors told you that the only way that you could really treat your heartburn was to take some type of inhibitor or
right.
like Nexium for the rest of your life,
right.
that lower stomach acids and it depletes your natural stomach acid.
Right.
That would be an example of allopathic medicine treating the symptom.
That is correct. You give a proton pump inhibitor that essentially shuts down the gastric. But when we think about it logically, what are we doing when we shut down the output of hydrochloric acid? Think about this. It's logical. It's logical, a logical train of thought to be asked, that we ask ourselves, what happens if we shut down stomach acid? Isn't that supposed to be there for a particular reason? When we begin to ask ourselves, we become suspicious of many of the allopathic routes. shutting down hydrochloric acid means that it propagates other problems. That's just to use it as an example, but you are correct. That's allopathic medicine.
All right. And what would the, I guess, chemistry approach to severe heartburn?
Well, it's generally referred to as Barrett's syndrome. It can induce something called Barrett's syndrome, where it's a erosion of the mucosal lining in the esophagus. Generally, it's a weakness in it can be either a hiatal hernia, it can be an overgrowth of something called pylori, which is bacteria. There can be several consequences that cause it. Please note that gastric reflux, or what they refer to as excessive heartburn, so on and so forth, has been increasing in its incidence that we see in America. Why is it increasing? Just literally, it just keeps multiplying as years go on. And we have to look at the implications of other medications that are causing that could be causing it. Stress factors.
Our diet, of course, is probably
exactly
a factor. So
exactly, when a lot of people don't understand that it could be as simply as taking a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar 3 times a day that has malic acid in it, and that malic acid can eradicate a lot of the complications that initiate gastric reflux. Simple apple cider vinegar instead of a proton pump inhibitor.
So that's what you would do if you had severe heartburn.
Well, that's if I interview the patient. Generally, what I do is I look at the possibility of introducing something called bismuth. Something as simple as Pepto-Bismol, but Pepto-Bismol is loaded with sugar. But inducing bismuth can eradicate some of the pylori, number one. And number two, try the apple cider vinegar. I've had patients that use it, and it eradicates that. It's something as simple and easy as that because of the malic acid in the apple cider vinegar. So I think there should be an explanation on why apple cider works. People say apple cider just works. I feel comfortable being able to tell people what is in the apple cider that is causing it to work, and that's why I feel comfortable talking about the science of it, the malic acid proportions and so on and so forth. But yeah, they should try that first and see what happens.
Right. And if their triglycerides were high, would that change?
That's called hyperlipidemia, and high triglycerides aren't not necessarily affect gastric reflux. Hyperlipidemia, obviously, as we all know, can induce a cardiovascular condition in the future that can be detrimental to where they could have a predisposition for any type of cardiac arrest or so on and so forth. Hyperlipidemia is basically diet itself that raises blood fats, and there's a difference between hyperlipidemia and cholesterol, and that's important. Sometimes there's not a dissociation on the two. Hyperlipidemia can be controlled definitively with diet and specific type of supplements that can be used that are simple and inexpensive.
So let's move on to talk about the standard educational process that most doctors get, and we have a concern. I mean, we're never criticizing the individuals themselves, the medical professionals, because we think that they really genuinely want to help their patients and they really want to see them get better. But there is concern that their educational process is lacking in certain areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you were to make changes to that, what changes would you make?
Obviously, chemistry. Biochemistry, number one, obviously. I think it would be advantageous for them to take more courses in, as an example, psychology and understanding that it's important to listen to the patient, important to listen to their needs. And 3, nutrition would be advantageous because nutrition is overlooked many times. I mean, look at the nutritional conditions that we have going on in the world today and the obesity factors. Those 3 things are paramount to me. Is obviously listening to the patient, being more compassionate. Compassion is really important in medicine, I feel. And chemistry, understanding chemistry. And obviously most people are afraid of chemistry. They skip by with a semester of it and that's it. And then obviously being able to understand nutrition and the life patterns of individuals that lead to many of the pathologies that we see today.
And once they graduate and they have their own practices, you bring up this terminology, cookbook medicine, a lot. Can you explain that?
Cookbook medicine is basically the average time a physician spends with a patient is about 9 minutes, and generally Cookbook Medicine is literally going to the book, looking at what the best process to use and what, and they don't literally have to go to the book, but it's literally verbatim going to the book. And as an example, the Merck manual suggests this and that, and doing that. And the Merck manual, by the way, is excellent as far as educational processes on pathology. I think it's excellent. I recommend it to a lot of people, but it's literally the standard cookie cutter stamp out, this is what we're going to do, for, if it's, conjunctivitis as an example, this is what we're going to do, without looking at other possibilities. Cookbook Medicine is literally say, well, this is a typical standard procedure. This is what we're going to do, give this antibiotic ointment, so on and so forth, and just move on.
Right. And kind of following these cookbook recipe methods are advantageous in the idea that, you're not going to have crazy doctors doing experiments on their patients. But it's not advantageous because the patients end up not learning about other methods that could really help them.
That is correct. And it's important that the patient learn themselves so they don't have to go to the doctor all of the time. What we wanted to do is a project, it's home health care, where I generally go to a house, we visit with the people, and this is aired so people could see how to take care of themselves, and recommendations are given, and then we go back 3 weeks later and film them and see how they improved, and that could be an educational format. My emphasis here is I love people to start taking their health care under their own hands and being able to take care of themselves so they don't have to spend their money on other practitioners, or even like myself, so you don't have to spend money on myself. People like me, to tell you what to do. I prefer that these people begin to learn and address their conditions, many of the conditions themselves. Obviously, there are conditions that we can't take care of. We have to very responsibly rely on medical doctors to take care of things that it's really important. And I encourage people not to turn their backs on Western medicine or allopathic medicine, because they bring a very valuable aspect to healthcare, and that's important that we have them. It's just, once again, has to be understood we have to understand the limitations of all procedures. My procedures have to have limitations. Their procedures have to have limitations. Once we understand those limitations, that gives us a better idea and a venue on how each of us can participate in the healthcare environment.
It's kind of difficult for doctors to, number one, maybe they don't know about other more effective methods, but they're also in constant fear of lawsuits, that if they do something that's not quite in the cookbook, then they stand the risk of getting sued. So for them, it's much safer to just do this cookbook method.
And that's once again the fear. Remember, I mentioned about fear. Everyone's living in fear. And I think the patient has to participate in that process as well, and understand the responsibility that then when they see the practitioner, it's their responsibility to understand and accept what the practitioner is giving them. The patient has to understand responsibility and accept responsibility for themselves, and therefore not sue the doctor, because they have to take responsibility for themselves as well. And the physician has to take responsibility for giving the best possible prognosis that they can. Does that make sense? We have to participate on an equal process here of patients and physicians both.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
I think, and that would lower the cost of healthcare. It would also allow a process that eases the practitioner's workload, and it would take the pressure off the patient to take a progressive standpoint on their health. It's very difficult for me, quite honestly, to expect someone like you to pay for someone else's health care who doesn't care about their health, that wants to be lethargic and sit on the couch and eat potato chips. And even though I have to respect it because that's what they choose to do, but then they expect, well, why am I overweight? Why am I having a cardiovascular event? And then other Americans have to suffer the burden of that. And I think that's unfortunate. It's sad, because not only is the patient laying on the couch not care for themselves enough to take care of themselves, but it also increases the burden on this country.
All right. So, I mean, a part of the message that we want to send out is for people to take their health into their own hands and really educate themselves and learning and care about their well-being. And
also to inform them that it's really not that hard. to take their health into their own hands. It's not as work laden as it's proposed to be. People say you got to get out there and exercise every day no, that's not what you have to do. It's really simpler, and food can be made to taste delicious without having to go to McDonald's or this or that, and it could be done fast, it could be done expensively. It's about letting people know that you can have the same types of food that you eat right now. They can be prepared in a different fashion, so it's healthier for you, and then you're not going to want to stay on the couch as much, even though you can stay on the couch, but you can still be healthy. That's the process.
Right, and we'll be talking more about that in future episodes.
Sure.
So, as to answer the subject of our episode about what we can do to lower healthcare costs, it just seems like we just need to pursue less symptom-based methods of treatment and give people access to cheaper methods. Exactly,
and to basically accept accountability. We have to be accountable for ourselves and what we're doing, and the medical world has to be accountable as well. And basically, it's really easier than it seems. And I've seen it here. I've been in this practice for 20 years, and it really is easy. And how often do I have patients find comments saying, Kevin, thank you so much for doing this because our cost has gone down. We haven't seen a doctor in 5 years. We're eating better, but it's delicious the way we're eating because of the way you taught us anything, and we're doing great. We want to thank you. That's a tribute to them, not necessarily to me, but they have to pat themselves on the back because they really, and most Americans, every American can do this if they would like to. And the thing is, and I want to emphasize this, if there's a lot of fear involved, thinking, well, I've got to go down and work out every day to do this. No, weight loss is not exercise necessarily. Weight loss is not, or health is not about getting out and having to go out in the cold weather and walk and run. No, we can continue our lifestyle the way we like to and just adapt these little things that can make tremendous differences in our health and our lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of conventional hospitals that everybody goes to, if they could improve themselves by adopting different methods, by maybe having a naturopath, having a nutritionist in their department, having a biochemist as part of what they offer to patients, we would see a significant change in people's experience at the hospitals and in their overall health.
That is correct. It would, in my personal opinion, would round out healthcare as we see it, and I think the physicians would feel more comfortable with what they're doing. The patients would feel more comfortable when they visit the hospital or their doctor's office. It's about comfort. It's about it's about security, making one feel that they are on the right road and experiencing it. It's just not about the thought process. It's about experiencing it themselves, and that's what's important.
And overall, it's just a better outcome for the people. It benefits the people. It takes care of our family members so that we don't have to stress about them being sick all the time.
Exactly.
Because nobody wants that burden, obviously.
Exactly. And it takes care of the healthcare profession as well. Everyone benefits by doing this. So that's why we're excited about this book. When we have a lot of work to do on it yet, but it will be. We would also like to get that process going to where we can air this project to where literally people now can watch TV. We go to a home, the person suffers from diabetes, I sit down with them, I analyze what they're eating, I talk to them, people can view that, we can see, hey, listen, and I recommend the changes, we come back in 3 weeks and we see what has happened, and people can say, listen, this is easier than I thought it was. Mm-hmm. And that's what's important.
Is that TV project already in development? How far along is that?
No, it's not in development. It's in the planning stages. I've got everything written out. I've got the basic format written out, and all we're doing is we need just a sponsor. And I know that there are a few film companies that are entertaining it, but we haven't gotten anything yet. And I think it's one of the most exciting things and the most most valuable things that could be on TV personally, because I think it would reach out to a lot of homes, people that don't want to read a book, people that want to see it firsthand. It would be like a reality home makeover, but reality for health makeover. And that's how I look at it. I think it would be great. And Mars Callahan was one of the geniuses that came up with this process. And, it's literally about moving forward with this project. That would be great.
Mm-hmm. And if Oprah called you and wanted you to come on her show and talk about all this stuff, would you be up for that?
I would definitely be in for it if it was done on a basis of educating people and letting us know, or I would be, as long as the word could get out there with what you and I are talking about today, definitely, because that's all this is to instill in people that healthcare is not that far out of the fingertips, the reach, for them to be able to take care of themselves.
All right. And just go back to this whole concept of how we can change the conventional medicine world to better take care of patients. I just want to bring up a personal example. After I had done chemo last year, my blood work showed that my liver was toxic. It was in very bad condition, and someone who had experience in herbology told me that I should drink milk thistle. Never heard of it before, and got a bottle, and it tasted awful. And it was like a bottle like this big, and it was the worst tasting thing in the world. But as I took it, I would do constant lab work, and over the weeks, sure enough, my liver got better. And by the end of it, it was in pretty good shape. And that's the kind of thing that I wish was a part of what the doctors told you to do. Like after you did chemo, the doctor should be advising you to take all these different things that will help clean you out and help put your health back on track.
Correct. I agree with you completely. And if that is vacant, which it is right now, fortunately with what you're doing, in my personal opinion, is getting the information out there that something like that, using celmarium seed, which is what you use, milk thistle, it's getting the word out there to say, listen, now people have an avenue. If they go to Thuys, your blog, they can understand, listen, we can go there and get information. It's right there at our fingertips. So no longer do they have to be in the dark and feel like, wow, there's nothing I can do. My AST, my ALT levels are high, my liver's been tanked, and so on and so forth. Now they have an understanding that there are options. So when you asked if, a host asked me to come onto their show, basically in the format and the presence and the understanding that this is here to educate people, that's what the premise is about, because that's what I'm delighted to do. Right. Just like as I'm sitting here with you today.
Right, and from talking to you, we've been talking back and forth a lot for the past week. I can feel your passion for your methods, for wanting to help people and wanting to get your method out. You really believe in this.
The reason why is because I've seen how it works. I see that it does work. And if I didn't work, it would be a little different. I'd have to reassess, but I see what is happening with my patients. And it's like, it's just too bad I'm here in Jackson, Wyoming, in this little place where more people don't have this at their hands. It frustrates me because I see so many people out there, if it's in Tallahassee, if it's in New York, if it's in, Bakersfield, California, wherever, I see these people suffering, and I just unfortunately cannot get to them, and that's what's frustrating to me. Because I do not like seeing people suffer like this.
Right, and you genuinely want to help people. That is your passion. That is almost your obsession, I feel like.
And Led Zeppelin.
And Led Zeppelin. That
is true. And obviously my dog. So I have a patient out there, unfortunately. I have to get going. But if there's, I hope this is advantageous to your viewers, if you get many viewers. And I would like to propose, if anytime, Thuy, that you want to set another one of these calls up, I'm happy to spend my time and put this time aside for talking to you and your viewers. That's what I'm here about. If there are questions that people have for me, I'm happy to address those as well.
All right, and this is going to be a regular thing going on. We're going to do this once a week for now, and if we have the time for it and there's high demand, we might do it twice a week. We'll see how it goes. But the whole point is that we want to give people access to your information. And if they have questions that they're concerned about, they can simply go to the blog, biochemhealth.com, send us an email, and we'll email them back about their concerns, or we'll talk about it on the show. So it's a very interactive type of format.
Very good. That's excellent. And I hope it's worth everyone's time, because it definitely is worth mine. I mean, this is what, as you mentioned, this is what makes me happy, is being able to contribute in the best way that I can.
All right. And we both are very excited about bringing this to people and giving people access to the mind of Kevin.
Welcome to bizarre world.
I know. Have you ever had an IQ test?
I think I have, and I don't want to share it from the fact that, that's a lot of people judge people on that, and yeah.
So you got an 85?
I don't want to say anything about that, but okay. It's because it's. I mean, I can, and I'd have to get the numbers again, and my GPAs and everything else in college. But I just want to ask that question or answer that question aside. Anyone can be this way if they really show the passion.
Right.
It's not just relegated to me. Everyone has the potential to be able to do something like this. If it's not this medical profession, if it's what everyone, in my personal opinion, it's what everyone desires. If they really bring their full potential, the sky's the limit. And so to answer your question, a lot of people consider me unique. Let's put it that way. I don't know if that's good, or I don't know if that's bad.
I mean, I'm a pretty smart kid, and except for when I'm watching Wheel of Fortune, and I know a lot of smart people, but I think that your brain is quite special. Well, not to inflate your head or anything like that.
Well, okay, but listen, and the same with you, and once again, if there's anything I can do to help you in the process with what you're doing, which I think we're on the road to, or any of your viewers, please don't hesitate, and just contact. And like you said, if we could do this once a week, I'm happy to. I'm here 10 days a week working in this office, and I'm happy to spend time, because this is important to me. It's about getting this out there.
It is. I think it's very important. I can't imagine anything more important than health, because firsthand I see the destruction that it does to your life when.
Yeah, and you've personally seen it, and you deserve the accolades for bringing this to the public. I think you deserve a pat on the back.
All right,
okay?
I'll pat myself on the back.
Good, and take care of that lawnmower outside. I hear it going.
I know. I told Kevin my stepdad Kevin to not make any noise.
Oh well, he'll be waving in the window.
I think he's just being a pain.
Yeah.
So everybody, thank you so much for watching our first episode. I hope you found it interesting, and that you're intrigued, and that you want to hear more. There's going to be more to come, and if you have suggestions for how we can make the podcast better, because I'm kind of a newbie at this, or if you have questions, then go to the blog, biochemhealth.com, send me an email, leave us a message. We really want to hear from you. And so we'll be...
Good, and tell the gentleman with gastric reflux, try the apple cider vinegar first, and try plain simple pure bismuth, and see how he starts to respond to it. And something called deglycerinated acid, which is licorice. It's unsweetened licorice, and if you choose those caps, I mean, that guy will probably be a different person in about a month.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Our next episode is going to be about connecting the food economy with our health. So if you have questions about that, you can go ahead and send those to me, and I can kind of work it into the next podcast. All right, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Bye.